that's a perfect representation of how my mother.
It's kind of wild Monday.
Is it a full moon? Because
Something is weird about today.
if it happens with kids, it happens with patients. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
it's real.
Luke looks intense.
But this menacing mustache.
It's the mustache.
Is he becoming an enforcer? Is that what he's gonna do?
It is the NHL playoffs, isn't it?
Got a lot of serious business today. That's, I'm in the zone.
Elliot, are we recording yet?
Yeah. I take it you're gonna hold that thought?
Yep.
I believe today is Howard's birthday, which is why he's not here.
He doesn't want to share it with us.
Yeah, really? You didn't bring any treats or anything?
Happy birthday to Howard.
7 days, you can give him a hard time.
Yeah, we're gonna be sick of each other before the end of May.
Zach is ready, just FYI.
Everybody ready?
Do it.
I will now call to order the April 28th, 2025 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Hillary, would you call, the time is 5:45 p.m. Hillary, would you call the roll, please?
Samuelson,
Here.
Force, Eaton, Hinders, Thompson.
Here.
Steiger,
Here.
Reagan.
Here. Item number 3 is the approval of tonight's agenda. Any changes to this evening's agenda? Hearing nothing, I'll entertain a motion and a second to approve tonight's agenda.
Is that your motion?
Thompson second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Item number 4 is the approval of the April 14th, 2025 minutes. Any changes to those minutes? Hearing nothing, I'll entertain a motion in a second to approve the April 14th, 2025 minutes.
Thompson
motion.
Samuelson will second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 I'd like to welcome the guests that have joined us here in person and on the Zoom tonight. Would any member of the public like to make a comment on an item that is not on tonight's agenda? Hearing nothing, we'll move on to number 6, request from Iowa Hearing Center for approval of the site plan of Iowa Hearing Center. Elliot, would you brief us on this item, please?
Yep, so this is the commercial site plan for the redevelopment of 1421 Sunset Drive. I think you guys are pretty well aware of what's going on here because we did the rezoning for this to infill PUD. And the site plan that has been submitted to us fits the regulations that we outlined in there. So this is the basic site layout with a demo plan. They're doing some adjustments to the concrete there, which there's going to be a little bit of an impact to the trail for a brief period. Public Works is aware of that, and the applicant and them are coordinating on that aspect of things. The building is square north-south with the parking in the front. Because of and I think we talked about this in the rezoning hearing, we have an access agreement with the DOT dictating where driveways can and can't go relative to the highway, whether that's on Sunset Drive itself or on side streets that tee into Sunset Drive. And so this is the access arrangement that is compliant with that agreement. So that's the kind of the two main points. Something that's a little interesting about this site that we don't see too often in Norwalk, save at Luena Savings Bank, is underground stormwater detention. So that's what you're seeing here in the kind of the red outline in the middle. So that's cool because it makes it so smaller sites have more development potential when they don't have to accommodate stormwater with a surface level basin. So there's the architectural rendering to give you an idea of the visual. The material classifications are all in line with the architectural regs. And yeah, so that's all good to go from a zoning perspective. I don't have anything further to add. Happy to answer any questions. And our two in-person guests are part of this project.
Thanks, Elliot. Would the applicant or the applicant's representative like to make a comment on item number 6?
Snyder and Associates. I'd just like to say, we took the access point. We are working with the property owner to the south to get that access out on Highway 28. It's not ideal, but I think that's kind of the best solution for this site, so. They did a good job kind of presenting the project there, and we're happy to answer any questions.
That was my one question. We've had the issue come up recently where there've been discussions about access and then it gets to us and things haven't gone well. Have those conversations been going well so far?
So easements have been drawn up and there are ongoing conversations with the
Okay.
property owner to the south. We recognize that this site cannot move forward without that access.
Okay.
Was the state not willing to budge on the side streets that access?
Correct.
Yeah.
Is it because you're too close to the intersection?
Correct.
I think we did something similar with the chiropractor place that's on Richard George. Like he doesn't have the side access. It's all in front.
To meet the access spacing of this intersection would have been cost prohibitive. There's some overhead electric significant to move, and then it would end up on the house that is there to the west as well. It conflict with that. And then there wouldn't be very good lining up with the senior living on the north island, which could cause some potential issues. This appeared to be the best approach.
Any other questions from the commission?
Elliot, do we have to do anything special as a E and Z commission for the underwater groundwater retention
Nope.
pond?
No, they just have to properly detain the correct amount, whether that's in a surface basin or an underground basin. It's kind of up to them. And this meets all the engineering expectations we need for detention, which is good because this was a previously developed site that didn't have detention, and now it will have detention. So that should help the immediate downstream properties, manage stormwater in extreme situations.
No, I think it's genius.
I wish we'd see more of it, frankly.
Especially if you have plan on having a garden. I mean,
Yes.
you could get a lot of rainwater potential.
Yeah, I think it makes really good use of the site.
Yeah.
With the way that everything's laid out, given the constraints of the site itself, we're still making really good use of it. Any other questions or deliberation from the commission?
Sidewalk on the north, I'm assuming that's driven by that utility pole.
There is a guy wire.
Oh,
And-
and utility pole.
We're not a big fan of decapitating folks.
Mm.
So we're coming out and around the guy wire. There are options that those guy wires can come off perpendicular and
Yeah, I
down
did
for
think that,
pedestrian
yeah.
crossings. But again, that's an economics thing, so we're going around the guy wire and providing it.
There's no sidewalk there now, right?
Correct, not on the south side.
And
And
there's
then-
still not once you get to the west.
Correct.
Correct.
And then the curve at the intersection is because the trail.
Yep.
And the way that intersection lines up, we're hitting the common panel.
You have sign, monument sign or anything on here?
There will be, it's not shown on this site plan. That was one of staff's comments. There's gonna be one just off that parking lot there, at the
On that
intersection.
northeast corner of that?
Correct.
Okay. But it's still way back,
It'll meet city code requirement.
Gotta be 10 feet off the property line.
that's fine.
Just stuff. And
It's
then
a
if it's
pain in the butt to see back to the
It could be-
south there when you're coming east.
bigger if they set it back more.
It'll be fine.
That's typical.
And I know the city has a separate sign permit process. It'll go through that as well.
Right.
Any other comments or deliberation? Hearing nothing, I would entertain a motion to approve the site plan of Iowa Hearing Center.
Steiger motion.
Thompson seconds.
Hillary, would you call the roll, please?
Thompson,
Aye.
Steiger,
Right.
Samuelson,
Aye.
Reginator.
Aye. Thanks, everyone. Item number 7 is a recommendation on a parking waiver for the Fairway Fields and City State Bank Fieldhouse to identify a temporary parking location. Luke, I think you're gonna brief us on this one.
I sure will. So when the fields were initially built, we just had that south parking lot constructed with them. And at the time of that plan going through, the city considered and ended up issuing a temporary parking waiver for the area in the yellow on the south labeled previous temp parking lot. Last year, we got more parking built, the north primary parking lot and east primary parking lot, and didn't have a temporary parking waiver, though we did notice people kind of parked where they wanted to. We tried to have the operators of the fields make sure that people didn't get into that old temporary parking lot. Not sure how exactly successful that was, but did make attempts for that. And then this year, coming into the sports season, we've got the field house now open. All of the north parking lot is now open. Last year, the first 2 rows of parking were a construction zone for the Sportsflex building that's getting built. It's you can see obviously under construction in the map. So coming into this year's kind of sports season with the fields getting up and operational, there was a desire both from the private side and from our parks and public side to talk about a what if we need to have a temporary parking scenario. That process is you guys making a recommendation to city council on what to do. So that's 2 meetings. And then we kind of threw in a third one in because we felt like council needed to kind of almost like a rezoning, initiate this and send it back down to you guys. So they did that at their last meeting. There's not really any direction from their standpoint. We just kind of identified these 3 to /4 areas as potentials. I did talk to the Parks Department. One of their concerns is that north lot getting busy during tournament times. And if they have a similar event going on, then obviously concerned that there wouldn't be parking for patrons to the field house. So they liked the idea of the previous parking lot that was done because that would put field house or field users, not field house users, Heartland sports field, fairway field users to the south there, preserving more of that northern parking lot to be open. But again, that's their opinion and thought on it. Obviously, you guys need to talk about it and make a recommendation. And then council will deliberate that recommendation and determine things. So areas that we've kind of identified as potential, there's a previous temporary parking lot that's currently there. Obviously, this was previously used. It's got the gravel to help minimize dirt, so that's a plus. Negative is its adjacency to the neighborhood to the south and concerns and issues that they had in the past when it was used. There's the Sportsplex outlot, which is kind of right adjacent to the north primary parking lot. So it's kind of close to everything. It's got good proximity. It is being marketed right now. So we've not heard of anything going on it. I know that they would probably sell it if somebody wanted to buy it. Though I don't feel like that's probably going to happen this year. So that is one. Negative of that is there's no gravel out on it now. So it could be a pretty messy scenario depending on weather. And then last areas, we kind of lumped them together into the city and diligent parcels. It could technically be two different pieces. That's a huge area of ground. Basically, the city library lot is the north half of this yellow square I've drawn, and then Diligent has a townhome project that they've taken through on the south side of that lot, but they are not actively in the process of building it out. Similar issues with being a farm field right now. Basically, it's not going to be the cleanest lot to use. The other thing with it is there is a farming lease in place with it. The city and Diligent signed a lease with the same user. That's a user that Diligent works with a lot, apparently, so they didn't feel like it was insurmountable to have them renegotiate that. But that is a hurdle that we'd have to go over for any of those, whether it be just a city library lot, just Diligent, or we did something that kind of focused on that. Obviously, that box I drew there is massive. We would not be saying that'd be like the whole thing, right? It would probably be a smaller quarter section of that, which, maybe straddles the city and Diligent land. Maybe it's directly adjacent to the Sportsplex outlot. That could take a lot of different forms. Just a couple other things to note, parking space wise, current availability. The north lot has 226 spaces. The eastern lot has 123. And the south lot has 146. And then we have the Hughes and High Road on-street parking that we plan to be kind of part of the parking for all of this is 67. So that's 562 spaces out there today that are paved parking. There is the ability to park on street along East 18th. So I just did some quick measurements and ran if you went from Chatham to High Road and you just stacked cars in on-street parking there, that'd be another 65 spots you could get. Negative to that would be there's not good pedestrian facilities there. Pretty much anybody that parked in that stretch would have to walk in the street to get to the sports complex. Similarly, there's on-street parking along the entire length of Chatham, but again, there's not great pedestrian access over to the field house. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions. But I'd leave it to you guys to kind of talk through the options.
Is this need for temporary parking something that the city anticipates every year?
I don't think so, because again, like as this develops out, we're still missing a lot of this, private parking. That was the idea, being that people would overflow into that back behind to the north of the north part primary parking lot as part of the Norwalk Central area. The Sportsplex outlot, if that builds out, that'll add some parking most likely. You got some undeveloped area in the private property, no parking. That's likely going to build out, and again, all of those users are going to think their parking is their parking, and they may or may not tow people, but the reality is people park where they can, right? And I'm sure that there have been people that have been to the fields that parked in the Subway parking lot, and I'm sure Subway doesn't like it when that happens, but it does, right? So yeah, I think it's yet to be seen. I think when we did the full master plan for this whole area, we thought that with the other private stuff there'd probably be another 500 parking spots. So you'd say, 1,000 total in the area to accommodate field house and fields and any private users, which seemed like a reasonable thing, knowing that people would probably spill out and park in areas adjacent. Yeah, it's just, it's one of those things where we don't know. So it's a concern that was raised up from the city side. as well as the private side. So
Why is this being brought up this year when last year we did not have to do any temporary waiver?
because the field house is now open and there's expectation that the users of the field house, there might be times of overlap between a field house event and a fields event. And we don't necessarily want to limit our ability to bring in revenue on the field house by, doing one event or the other every other weekend and kind of deferring. So just
But
trying to.
isn't that part of what, when it was being developed, that you took into consideration of having events at both at the same time?
Yeah. It's one of those scenarios where it's like a Walmart. Like, what's the right amount of parking, right? Do you build the parking for the Black Friday rush, which, a Walmart would, or do you build it more reasonable for what the everyday use would be? And then you have to deal with a scenario at a Black Friday rush, right? This is built more for not for the maximum parking. I wouldn't say it's built for just the average everyday use, because average everyday use is pretty low. But it's built to accommodate lots of users out there. I can't say specifically that we sized it to say we're going to have a huge basketball tournament at the field house and a huge softball tournament at the fields, and everybody's going to have a parking spot directly adjacent. Because if we did that, we probably wouldn't have Norwalk Central, right? We would have all of that area north of the trail would be parking.
So that being said, Luke, is there plans for the city to buy either one of those private property, no parking areas and actually put in parking?
Not at this time. The area on Cherry Parkway and Sunset Drive, you guys will see coming up probably in the next 3 to 6 months, site plans for 3 users in that area. So that's kind of getting set up for development right now. The private parking, no parking area directly west of the field house, half of that is the city kind of public space park that's adjacent to the field house. And then the side that fronts High Road or Hughes Drive is a commercial lot. I don't think I've ever heard any concept on that. Elliot may have had some conversations, but I haven't.
The only reason I ask is because you mentioned, people could park on East 18th or High Road, but if you've ever tried to drive and actually have 2 cars pass each other, you have to be on your best European driving behavior, which isn't always going to happen here in the US. And so normally, us Americans, we find an open spot between cars to pull off to let the oncoming traffic pass if we are on the same side as the parked cars. But when that High Road or 18th Street is packed with cars from bumper to bumper, you're scraping mirrors. Even with the roads that we have. I mean, in Europe, you'd be able to do it, but they all drive like Elliot, smaller cars and pristine driving. So, but I think, you get any size of vehicle, which most vehicles in sports areas are Suburbans size. And now you're in a problem. And so that's where I'm saying, I think we need to step ahead of this as a city. And if this is something that we want to do, we should add some parking here, or maybe, take that area north of the fields and make it the Luke Paris parking garage or whatever. But actually size this for the parking that we know it's going to have, because these are turf fields. So they started in March and they're going to go till October, November. And last I checked with Elizabeth, she doesn't want to put a parking garage in her backyard either. So I think it was a huge oversight on this commission's part.
It was, I will say, I was the only one who counted out the parking spaces. And I said, we do not have enough parking, and I was ignored. So it's infuriating. It's awful. We're still short even before the field house opened.
So I think where I'm at is that I guarantee you that these private parking, no parking will stay private parking, no parking for whoever comes in. There's very few businesses that are going to say, sure, come park here, even if you don't come and bring us business. No business owner is going to do that. So they're going to say, they're going to keep those that way unless we are proactive and come in as a city and add parking so that because we know that it's going to generate revenue. So we don't have to do like what you said, Luke, and do every other with the field house and the fields.
Yep.
But we want both. And we know that both have potential pretty much March through November now, with those being turf fields. And so it's not a Black Friday event. It is an every weekend event that starts on Fridays sometimes, but for sure are all day Saturday, Sunday. And if you look out there, most weeknights, it's full.
Yeah, and they're pulling in at 3:30 on weeknights.
Yeah.
And they're there till, 10:30.
Yeah. So in my mind, this is not, if we were proactive as a city, and George, this is probably where you step in too. If we were proactive as a city and said, we're going to add parking, yes, this takes away from business opportunity, but it adds business opportunity because all these people that are pulling in here to these fields and the field house are bringing business. But it's just a responsible thing to do. Otherwise it spills out into all these side streets. And I don't know, I mean, it's only going to take a few mirrors getting knocked off before word's going to spread that, Norwalk isn't the place to go for field events because there's no parking. And if you park on the street, you're going to lose a mirror. That's just my thought.
Yep. So just a couple things to that. You're right. High Road is a narrower road with on-street parking on it, and purposely done because you've got residential right there. We didn't necessarily want people to be using that as I got to get to my kid's game, so I'm going to fly down this road really fast, right? Like that's a safety feature. East 18th is wider. That it would accommodate our normal kind of on-street parking. Again, when there's on-street parking, we kind of anticipate people to slow down and pay attention and do some of that stuff. So hear you that's a concern, but I guess I'd rather have them hit a mirror than a kid. The area that is to the north of the north parking lot, like the rest of Norwalk Central, from when we were thinking of this and back when planning commission, and I can appreciate the thought that maybe we missed the mark here, but the rest of that parking that gets built as part of Norwalk Central, that was contemplated as being the kind of private side of parking that would also help out with all of this. It's not built yet because it's going to get built as private things go. But that's supposed to be a giant shared parking lot for the users there. So it's not like that parking lot in the front is Fairway or Fairfield's parking and they can mark all those spots to Fairfield, right? Same thing with Cooper's or the retail building there. So, from that regard, I do feel like there's parking that's missing out there that's not complete. It's not part of the sports complex planning and site plan, but it is kind of part of the overall concept there. And then, of course, I mean, you're right. Like any user out there is not going to want someone coming and parking in their spot. It'll happen though. So, that's for private to figure out if they want to patrol that more than what they've done. So
What is I know when you were speaking, Luke, you said west of the field house, half of that private property was it owned by the field house?
yeah, so Elliot, can you pull up Beacon and go into that area so we can see the property lines? So as part of this development, in the residential that was built in the area, there was a parkland requirement. And so this is the area that was dedicated to the city as parkland. So, there's not been real formal planning on it. I think the general idea is that we build a band shell somewhere in there. And the idea would be this would kind of be a space where a city can do city events, right? Maybe you could pull food trucks along that eastern western drive west of the field house, and kind of set up a music fest could be there, right? So that was kind of the thought for that Central Park area.
Could we not use that? I mean, it's already owned by the city, and if this is temporary, it won't disrupt a whole lot.
We'd have to find a way to get to it is probably the main problem. we could work with Diligent, I suppose, and see about putting like a gravel road, I guess, across that parcel directly to the west. Yeah, that one wasn't discussed in our kind of our initial meeting talking about the fields and the field house this summer. So I don't know if Diligence they may be more actively trying to sell that one, so they don't want to encumber it all summer with a gravel drive, but that's certainly something I could reach out and talk to them about.
It's a great idea.
I guess in my opinion, from the options that we've been given, the outlot makes the most sense to me. I don't approve of adding a temporary parking lot where it previously was because of all the issues that it caused last year. And I think that those homeowners have done their duty in terms of working with the city in this build out, and I think they've already been asked too much. So, and the idea of, getting rid of a farm lease that's already in place doesn't make any sense to me when there's an alternative.
So
It
you're
also
saying the Sportsplex outlet?
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, that Sportsplex outlot, yeah, it's not the best access to get to the ball fields, but it's just as close as those other existing parking lots. And
You don't have to cross the main road.
right, and it kind of guides users to the areas that we're trying to guide them to anyway, in terms of a, retail concept.
And to speak to the question of distance, the closest spot on that outlot is 350 or so feet from the kind of northeast corner entrance. And the closest spot from the old temporary one is about 500 feet to the entrance.
Yeah, and to have people walk through that area makes a lot more sense to me than trying to cross those busy.
Elliot, measure down that first drive and then over. That would be the shortest way to get to the field. And that's like an entrance, yeah. So like 323.
I mean, I appreciate that that northern lot, it's labeled as primary. So to me, that makes also the most sense to keep the parking where the primary lots are.
Yeah. To direct people will be a lot easier to get them into that lot versus sending them to that previous temporary lot.
Yeah, and that's, one of the ways that this was staged out and who built first. The concept of this was always that we wanted people to go to that north and east lot, right? Because that makes people drive down Chatham, and that creates traffic volume on Chatham, which makes commercial on Chatham viable, right? Unfortunately, we built the south parking lot first, so a lot of folks that got familiar with Norwalk, like that's in their mind where the fields are is that south parking lot. So hopefully over time, we focus more and more people going up to this north and east lot, and that kind of limits that.
Yeah, and I'm in agreement with Andrew and Elizabeth in terms of, I think the concept of it this year is that not everything is built out that can eventually be used for parking. But I think the city really needs to be thinking ahead as much as it can to understand that, if that parking is not going to be enough, that's something we have to deal with. Because if we want this project to be as successful as everyone wants it to be, without that parking infrastructure in place, it's not going to do all these grand things that the city thinks it will.
We have looked into hosting the state gymnastics meet, and when you apply for it, you have to have a certain number of parking spots, or you can't even consider that location. And so I would hate for something like that to be the case.
Just out of curiosity, do you know what that number is?
I don't. I can probably text some people and figure that out.
Because that would be good to know. And actually, I probably talked to Robin too, because maybe they have some same things when they're looking at basketball tournaments and other people that put stuff together. But knowing those numbers is kind of a threshold to try to meet. If that gymnastics tournament was like, you need 750 parking stalls to hold something there, right? And we've got, 350 available directly next to the field house. Like nobody's going to park in that south parking lot to go to one of those gymnastic things, right?
Right.
That would be some good info to know. And then, we do have city land nearby to the idea of the city building something, maybe it is a parking garage out there on the city library lot as kind of a first thing. Then we can donate earmark all the parking fees to the library construction.
Yeah. I'm with these guys. I guess anything except that previous temp lot is fine by me. I think, like you said, a lot of people expected they come into the south and they look for the easiest parking option there on the south, and that was their gateway. Where there were probably a ton of spots that were still open in the north and the east parking lot, but people were parking in that previously temporary lot. So I'm okay with any of the others, but yeah, obviously the Sportsplex outlot is the preferred option.
Something we might do, Elliot, I'm just throwing this out of the blue, but I know you'd mentioned before wanting to do parking studies of various things with our drone. So, maybe what we do one summer day out here when we know we got something at the field house, and we know that the fields are busy as we go out, and Elliot and I get to spend our Saturday flying drones over parking lots and just documenting its use and how much space we have. And then we can really determine if it's a problem for us or where it is. If it's the south is really full, but the north isn't, having that info local to our specific thing would probably be good. So
I don't know, 20 cars per baseball team with parents and grandparents.
Oh, I did math. And
That's-
it's, I'd say 30. There's, like you say, like 12 kids on a team.
Yeah.
And then you've got 8 fields with each having 2 teams playing at once with 12 players on each. That's 192 players / potential cars. And then I multiplied that by 2 because you've got the next set of games that arrive like an hour before their game starts. So then that's 384 players / cars. Then you've got some families that take 2 cars or have relatives. So even if you average it to 384 players times 1.5, that's 576 spots. But if you've got 2 cars per player, that is 768 spaces needed.
Yep. And again, when we did this layout, it's not contemplating the field house and the fields at full use. It is contemplating, per our code requirements for a recreation use, do you have enough parking for one or the other? Right.
But that's not realistic.
What I would, I guess,
Well, whether it's realistic or not, that's what our code says is required as a minimum amount of parking for fields or for, actually, I think it's significantly less than that. I'd have to do the calculation again, but, yeah.
I guess I would say
The other side to that is parking regulations are fantasy numbers anyway, so I can empathize with the idea that this isn't enough because they're made up numbers. So
yeah. I would go, if you drive by the Mid-American Recplex on any given weekend where they've got an event going on, they don't have nearly enough parking, and they're running shuttles from the DMAC lot and from the other lots along Grand down there. And that happens almost every single weekend.
Yeah.
That sounds like a system that is working for their product.
It is. And that's kind of the same thing here.
Not
Once,
for correction.
Yeah.
For a mistake.
yeah. Because you
Just my
can't,
2 cents.
if you drive by on a weeknight, there'll be 40 cars in the parking lot. You drive by on a weekend and there's just cars everywhere. And so it's one of those things that, like you said, you can't build for the worst case scenario because it's cost prohibitive. But as this gets built out, hopefully this problem solves itself. We can look at what we have for parking options. They should start handing out parking passes to teams in here. They a lot of them so that 2 parents don't drive to the baseball games.
George, did you?
They mentioned that when the city body, not that I represent the city council, but I am a representative from the city council. I just throw out a crazy idea. I like the parking ramp idea.
$30,000 a stall.
If it's, yeah, what's it cost?
It's about $30,000 a stall.
Ooh, that's expensive. Yeah,
Mhm.
I thought you said 3,000.
Oh no, 25 to 30.
It'd be ideal, in my personal opinion, if you could have that, but not saying it's a viable situation. And then provide parking going up. And not spend as much parking on valuable property for businesses on it.
Bingo, George.
And have people get out of their cars, walk around. And that's just my thought on it. So I'm trying to figure out, I knew there were some parking ramps around that pilot smaller towns. Well, lo and behold, I finally remembered one that I thought was pretty cool when I was a kid. This is when I was a kid, was Boone Island. They had I don't know how many cars it was, that just so happens where Luke came from, so he'd be familiar with it. And it's probably long paid for, probably got built very cheaply, I'm guessing back in the day. But, you know, just another option to contemplate. So,
Well, the other thing to consider long-term too is parking enforcement. I mean, I know that that takes resources that the city doesn't want to, you know, invest in that, but if that's what it's gonna take to make Norwalk Central, you know, what everyone wants it to be, nobody wants us to fail. So we might have to invest some more resources in that kind of thing to make sure that people are doing what they're supposed to do, not just what's most convenient in the moment.
he's Ingersoll down in Des Moines, it's like,
Mhm.
oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Like there, that one parking lot with nobody's there in the evening, but they patrol it like. If you park in there, you're gonna get towed. I can't remember what kind of strip mall type place. And, you know, you just avoid going to the area. The newer part, as you get toward downtown, that's okay. That older part, it's a little more dangerous, but. Don't wanna get in a situation like that. And somebody suggested to me that we put up, just like Des Moines did, the parking meters, you know, which those are pretty slick, actually. I could even use them, but that's music. And anyways, it wasn't my idea, somebody else was, that you charge all the out of towners, but in Norwalk, you have something with the vehicle that would indicate that there's no charge.
Sure.
We'll definitely go for that. But then, that's how you raise your money for whatever, that you might use, but anyway. I like the parking, if it's $30,000 a park, I assume that's a lot. Might be a bit much, I don't know, you have to do the math, figure it out. Yeah. That's my input on it.
Sure.
It seems like we're all up for unanimous agreement that the Sportsplex outlot, but not anything with the previous temporary parking lot.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Do we need to make a formal motion since this is just a recommendation?
That would probably be good just to have for the record.
Okay.
Are you looking for one place or blanket of multiple, or what are you looking, or like?
It says that our code reads, let me get back to it. So a waiver. You can get a waiver for parking requirements, provided a recommendation on such changes submitted by the Planning and Zoning Commission. So, if you recommend the Sportsplex outlot and maybe the city and diligent lot as like either two of those work, but you definitely don't want the tent parking lot, then the way I read it, and I've talked to Jim, is I don't know that council could approve the tent parking lot because you didn't recommend it, right?
I guess I'd be okay with that.
Same.
So I would entertain a motion to approve a parking waiver for use of the Sportsplex outlot as outlined in the map provided by Luke. As a secondary option, the undeveloped city library or undeveloped diligent lots as outlined. But we would not approve a parking waiver for the previous temporary parking lot as shown in the diagram.
Perfect.
Start your motion.
Thompson seconds.
Hillary, would you call the roll, please?
Thompson.
Aye.
Steiger.
Aye.
Samuelson.
Aye.
Reginator.
Aye. Thanks everyone for a really good discussion on that. Item number 8 is a request for a grading permit at 1120 Sunset Drive. Elliot, would you brief us on this item, please?
Yes, if this weren't the last minute ad, probably would have made this the second item rather than the third, but it doesn't look like we have anybody on the call representing this item, so no one had to wait very long. So basically what's going on here is some detention improvements are being made adjacent to the tenant space where Goodwill is looking to locate. They found out that while doing the tenant improvement and some renovation, that there were some grade issues that was potentially threatening as far as stormwater making its way into the building. So this is designed to help mitigate that and also, I guess, help prevent stormwater from bleeding over into the chiropractic lot to the north of here as well. So what they're going to be doing is grading out detention here and installing a tile down to the south side of the lot, which is currently a detention basin. So they're really adding detention capacity for the entire site. Because they are grading with more than 2 feet of cut and or fill, they need to get a grading permit from P&Z. So this is not a city council item. This is a you guys only agenda item. And city engineer reviewed this for compliance with everything we need, and it does. So do my best to answer any questions on this, but that's the summary.
With the Goodwill location, are there any plans to have a drive-through, drive-up donation area for them?
I don't know. That's not something that we've been made aware of.
Okay.
I think they have. Oh, I'm not actually before I pontificate.
When I saw they were moving dirt, that was the assumption I made before this was an agenda item.
Yeah, that sounds right. So I don't know. That the potential of a drive up drop off hasn't really been brought up to us.
Sure.
That doesn't mean it won't come to you guys at some point as a site plan amendment.
How long will this take? Like, will it close down access to Ace Hardware?
So I mean, it's all contained within private property. So and both Ace and Goodwill are owned by Doug Capel. So it's between Goodwill and Mr. Capel to coordinate, what part of the parking lot is torn up at what time. I imagine they won't tear up the entire thing all at once. They'll probably do it in 2 or 3 sections is my prediction to keep things moving.
It seems like a good option long-term, not just, to have it on the one side, to have it go through to the larger detention pond. Seems like a good idea for the site long-term. Any other deliberation or questions from the commission? Hearing nothing, I would grant the request for a grading permit at 1120 Sunset Drive.
Thompson motions.
Steiger second.
Hillary, would you call the roll? Sorry. And my brain just
Steiger. Steiger.
Aye.
Samuelson.
Aye.
Thompson.
Aye.
Reginator.
Aye. Thanks everyone for being patient. George, do you have any update for us tonight?
Not really. You kind of covered some of the things we were thinking of, on my mind anyway, especially with the parking ramps. I want to get out.
Yeah.
On that.
Great. I don't think Holly has joined us. Luke, any update for us for community development?
The main thing I just had was we kind of hit on it a little bit with the hearing clinic going in, that they're going to impact the trails. We had some discussion at council a couple council meetings ago about trail impacts and how long things get closed down, primarily related to that right in, right out that's getting built right now finally. and closing down the Highway 28 trail. So just a update for you guys that we didn't have real great language in our code about trail access closures and notification to the city. So most developers and contractors just kind of did a normal like, hey, we're doing this, and notified Public Works ahead of time. But we're kind of putting into our policies right now, might come back as an ordinance at some point, a lot more stringent closure of trails and putting in temporary trail if it's going to be disturbed for a long period of time and all this stuff, so that we can avoid some of these gravel scenarios, or at least have a better upfront idea of how long things are closed. But that's it.
That sounds like a great idea. Elliot, any update for us?
So just as far as item 12 is concerned, I do have a couple items that didn't quite make it to this meeting. And because of the way the calendar works in the upcoming month, I outlined that in the email that I sent you guys. Expecting those site plans here next week. We're really excited about one of them. Should be the mixed use development across the street that the Joseph family is looking at. We're real pleased with how that turned out. It's got some kind of unique things as far as the way we write up reports and whatnot. So I'll try to keep those descriptions brief as much as I can. But we're excited about that. I would like to kind of reiterate George's point earlier about having structured parking. I think this, I won't go too long about this, but I think this commission and city council have some really important decisions to make down the road once this thing, again, which is in progress, is built out and we know what the parking capacity for this place ultimately ends up being, about how to handle that and whether or not to turn Norwalk Central, our city center, into a parking crater or not. You can turn it into a parking crater or a parking column. If you make it a parking column, I'm fantasizing about what a 15-story parking ramp rather than 15 surface lots. If you find a way to finance that effectively, such as metering parking for out-of-town guests and that townies get a pass on that, that can be a huge benefit in the long run, not only to preserving that space, providing effective parking management, but also making sure the city doesn't go into crippling debt when inevitably that structure needs to be replaced, because those things have lifespans and also they are worth basically nothing on the tax rolls. If the city owns them, they are worth nothing on the tax rolls. And so preserving as much of that land laterally as possible for private development in an era when municipalities are stressed for resources, I think is super, super important to keep in mind when talking about this stuff. So I think George made some good points about those things. And so verbal high five, George. And that's all. I just wanted to, Luke took over most of that item, so I wanted to get my thoughts out. Otherwise, yeah, you guys will be getting an agenda from me at the end of this week.
Who's going to own the band shell? The city?
It's a city park.
Okay, so I think about my many trips to Germany. It's really hard to find an above the ground parking garage in Germany, but there's underground parking garages that go 3, 4, 5, 6 layers deep, and they're under nearly every building. It feels like.
That's the best thing you can do.
The Iowa City
Thank you.
Hospital system has one that we have to park at.
It costs a lot of money to dig. So AJ said 30,000 for structured. It's about 80,000 per stall if you dig. So that's ideal, because then your entire surface of your town center is stuff to do.
Right.
And resourceful property, right? And if you dig, let's pretend we're in Minecraft for a second, and you can just dig 1 layer down or 2 layers down on the entire site. And then maybe all that stuff is interconnected. Maybe every single building has underground parking. You can have 100% lot coverage instead of 1.5% lot coverage, like with some of our recent developments in town. And that is outstanding if you're trying to build a town center. But do we have the regulatory mechanisms in place to encourage that, let alone require it. That's a question that, kind of lingers out there. And we don't have those, right? So underground parking, the best thing you can do for your streetscape.
Okay,
Absolutely.
so this is where my engineering brain kicks in. Do you ever get ROI positive on a parking garage? Or does it become degraded to the point that you need to tear it down before you ever like actually see a return on your investment?
So that's all a product of how much it costs to park there. And generally, you need like downtown San Francisco, downtown Minneapolis, Chicago rates to get that ROI.
Like people who park there during the week too, not just on the weekends or for
Right.
events.
Unless you have rapid turnover and charge an event rate, which maybe that's
That's what I'm
maybe that's a
saying.
good idea.
We have event rates every weekend from March to November.
But
I
will
think
they
that's
come
worth
here and
contemplating.
use it If we charge those.
If your
things?
team has to come here, then you'll come here. Like a lot of times it's your coaches saying, okay, you're gonna have an event at this field house. This is where you have to park.
But do you see that at any other rec plexes that you're going
For
to?
gymnastics, we do. I guess I don't have any other events at field houses.
So I think about at least our fields right now, fairway fields, I don't think you pay to enter.
No.
I have not paid to enter. But there's a lot of other tournaments that I pay to enter and we pay like 20, 30 bucks a head to enter. So now if you're paying 20 to 30 bucks a car for the event, you're actually net positive as a consumer of the event because you're paying for one or two cars. And it's gonna incentivize people to know that they have to park in the parking garage and if they come to Norwalk or else come early. And now they're gonna drive one car. And so that'll ease things, but also it's still their money ahead versus paying 20, 30 bucks a head, whether you're a child or adult. And I don't know. I haven't done the math and I could sit down and try and think about some math, but if we're gonna have a band shell right there that's a city owned, could we put 3-4 layers underneath that now we just provide so much parking. So now parking, it still might be an issue if there's a band shell, field house, fairway fields activities all at the same time. But if we only ever have 2 of the 3 going at any given time, we've got parking to handle it. I'm just trying to think of, I'm ashamed of myself that I didn't listen to Elizabeth. I'm sorry, Elizabeth, for the record. We should have had more parking. I didn't at all think about the fact that turf would open up another 2 to 3 months on either side of a normal baseball season, it feels like.
But I think we're still not at full capacity, right? There's like another 500 spots that are gonna be finished out at some point in the next year.
Where?
And we don't know where if that's gonna fill the needs.
Well,
Yeah, we don't know exactly when it's
they're
gonna build
private
out,
parking.
but that shared parking lot to the north of, like, the Norwalk Central parking lot is
Yeah.
intended to be the planned area was Chatham to High Road, Hughes Drive to East 18th, right? So the thought is that people can park in that lot as well as kind of maybe like the overflow area. But it's all dependent on private development. I would be hesitant to say that's going to all build out in the next year. We had talked with Diligent a couple times about maybe the city could participate and just build the next phase of parking to see how that went. And I don't know if that's still on the table or not, but
While we're just throwing out ideas, is it possible, have you ever seen somebody build their parking lot before their library? And could we build our parking lot before our library? And if you get to the point where now that's parking, could we go to a paid parking attendant that's pulling in 10, 20 bucks a car and actually pay off our library parking lot before we build our library?
There isn't a rule that says you can't do
are
that.
great ideas.
I don't know. I'm just trying to think of ways to keep people from making our roads muddy, because if you park in a field, there's a good chance it's going to be wet and then there's going to be muddy roads. But if we could have the foresight for knowing how our site plan is going to be for our library and where our parking lot's going to be, build the parking lot first. Just anything we can do here. If it's obviously too expensive to go up or down with a garage. I don't know, I just look at this as a great opportunity, but it could end up being the biggest nightmare headache that all of us are gonna look back and wish that we had done different.
Meg, you're in the public comment.
Sure. You're limited to 3 minutes.
No worries. So, my husband works in entertainment and he used to work at Wells Fargo Arena, as well as Hoyt Sherman Place and the new place Vibrant out in Waukee. A key component of parking is you control access. So something that has already happened, that I live on East 17th. So I have seen the nightmare from when it began to a slight improvement because of the forethought of the collaboration between citizens, the police department, and the city. We started posting no parking signs starting between High Road and Merle Huff. And then those, in my opinion, should be extended to Merle Huff, because then you funnel those people into specific parking areas. And as Norwalk grows and we have more police officers added, they are already, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? They are already, that is some of their focus, because the more people you have, the more risk is involved. So if we think ahead to that and, okay, where is the absolute outmark of where we want that parking to be, and then push that forward? Yes, parking attendants. What about high school kids, you know, who need to have volunteer hours for courts for high school? I mean, there's just lots of opportunities to, for lack of a better word, herd people to certain entrances and exits and force them to park where we want them to park. Because as a mother of a toddler, where we live, full disclosure, Megan's childhood home, we are the street that connects Norwalk Central to the high school. And in 1 year, our mailbox has not been hit once, not twice, 3 times. And I have a 2.5-year-old at home. And we have a lot of young families on our street. And so there's already a lot of traffic going through there. And so before we are reacting to a tragedy, let's prevent that from happening. And by keeping that traffic where it needs to be.
Yeah, great points. And that's why I'm thinking, like, I look at 18th Street, 17th Street, Merle Huff, even, I mean, you even go south of there on a weekend and those streets are packed with cars parked because there's just nowhere to go. And so I like that we have tonight added some spots here in the outlot and in the field potentially. But I think we have an opportunity to make something really good so that people, when people hear they have a tournament at the field house, the Norwalk Field House, or at the Norwalk Fairway Fields, or there's a band event or whatever, they're like, oh yeah, like they think happy thoughts because they're not like, oh, I'm gonna have to park 4 blocks away or a half mile away and walk in. And then all of the residents in the area aren't like, I gotta make sure I keep my kids inside on weekends because it's just crammed traffic all the time. So I've belabored the point enough, but.
My only response to that would be that any public street in the city is built to a standard that the city has in place to provide street parking on one side. And anytime that street parking isn't being used, one could argue that that's a waste of money to build the street that way. That would be the only thing that I'd say in response to that. So I'm not arguing that that's right or wrong, but 28 feet wide is the standard in Norwalk. The widest car you can buy is the Volkswagen Touareg. It's 6 feet, 7 inches wide. 3 you can have parked and pass.
I totally agree with you.
On that street, on a
because-
28-foot wide street.
Because I've driven in Europe, I know that that's possible, but you are paying attention to the road. Like you pretend you're
Which
a
you
professional.
should be doing.
Right, you're a professional race car driver in Europe, and that's what you do. That's your only job when you're driving. But in the US, we're used to our I'm gonna say fat and happy roads where we don't have to pretend we're a professional. And sadly enough, I feel like we have to cater to that.
And the death rates on our roads are 4 times higher than in every other Western country.
Yeah.
So
Anyway, all right.
Yep.
Good chat.
You're,
Thanks.
you're correct, but so am I. So that's my update. Thank you.
Good discussion, everyone. Like Elliot said, our next meeting is gonna be May 5th. And then our second meeting in May is gonna be May 19th instead of Memorial Day. And at this time, I would entertain a motion in a second to adjourn.
So your motion.
1 seconds.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned at 6:47.